I absolutely hate what live service has done to video games, and we have yet another example of a live service game that never lived up to its original potential and died on the vine because it started off poorly, could never get the traction it needed to continue making money, to continue to have a active fan player base, and ultimately ended in a colossal disaster less than 3 years after it launched. I'm talking about Battlefield 2042, which as of yesterday, I believe, yesterday night, announced via a blog post that they were going to basically stop doing anything with the game. Season 7, known as Turning Point, would be the final season, and the team will now transition into exciting new projects. From the beginning, Battlefield 2042 was not great. I did videos where I said, it's not horrible, but it's not great. And over time, while the experience did increase and it did get better a little bit, ultimately it was just missing that flair and that oomph and that pizzazz that I think we all experienced playing Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. We never got that back. The introduction of the class system and the heavy emphasis on player cosmetics and the heavy emphasis on these kind of game-breaking gadgets like the flying suit and the turret that Boris could put down, or all the other things that came that just really changed the core experience of what Battlefield used to be, is long gone. And if you really look at the lineage of Battlefield games over the last 10 years or so, it's pretty safe to say the quality has not quite been there. And this one, unfortunately, fell under the exact same problem that the other ones did, of not enough emphasis on kind of what made Battlefield Battlefield. The world is saturated with first-person shooters. There are so many of them, and there are many good ones. So to release something with the Battlefield name, to get that, what I thought would be creative funding and drive and passion behind Electronic Arts, which to me, this should be their flagship first-person shooter. I know it's not that way anymore. I know they've transitioned over definitely into like Apex Land. But to me, this game deserved better than it got. And it doesn't surprise me. I have not played it in a very long time. Every so often, because I got it for free on PlayStation, I'll fire it up if I'm on the phone with my wife or watching something like a mindless movie and I just want something to do in the background. I'll fire up and play a match. They're not riveting matches. They're kind of boring. The sound design, is good. I guess that's probably the best thing I could say about it. But the moment-to-moment action is definitely lacking. There's a lot of imbalances in terms of certain weapons are definitely like weapon of the month. They never quite figured out how to balance properly. The vehicles are overpowered, so on and so forth. And the list goes on, but never really took off, never lived up to that hype of what people wanted it to be. And yet another failure in a long line of failures, in my opinion, of what the Battlefield franchise has become. I'll never say never. I've eaten way too much crow over the past of talking about how I will never do this again. I will never pre-order a game. I will never buy a collector edition. And then something comes out and it changes my mind. So I'm not going to sit here and dictate to you guys and say, you know what? I am never going to buy a Battlefield game again in my life. However, I'm definitely going to pause for the next one. I don't think I'm going to be that blind faith and hope, because looking back at what happened during Battlefield and looking at this evolution of 2042 over the years, I think the game wasn't really in a good place to begin with, and it never got better. And unfortunately, the world we live in now with video game development is rush a product out and we'll release it and patch it and update it later on after it's already come out. And I think it's a horrible design. And I think this is yet another example of that, where you don't have a good core design, you don't have enough maps, you don't have enough modes, you don't have enough weapons, you haven't given serious thought to how the game should be evolved, and instead you just rush it out. And nobody, and I mean nobody, liked the idea of this kind of character class shooter like you saw in Overwatch, like this hero shooter type game. Nobody wanted that. And that's what we got. And I think that they realized that later on as they try to take a step back from that. But that DNA was too far injected into, the core experience of the game. And they weren't able to pivot from that quickly. And I think that's the downfall of Battlefield. Going forward, if there is a forward, and I'm sure they will release another Battlefield game, despite the last decade being mediocre titles at best, it still does move the needle. It still does have some sort of notoriety to the name, and there is some brand recognition there. So I don't think EA is going to kill it. But going forward, I would encourage developers to really sit and think about what made the original Battlefield experience so unique against all the other shooters we have. Don't try to compete or emulate a game like Overwatch. Don't try to compete or emulate a game like Call of Duty or even Halo for that matter. What made Battlefield great was that reliance on teamwork, working together, having different characters that complemented each other, not having the universal soldier who could do all things in all situations at all times. That watered down the experience, that watered down player role. I think they don't give the community enough credit to understand that they need to work as a team in a giant battlefield, and instead have kind of, doped that down into okay, well, here's your guy who can heal himself, who has a regenerative armor, who has a rocket launcher, all these different things. Having distinct limitations on each character class is what made Battlefield so great. That really was it. Knowing you could go into any engagement and maybe not be the best for a current situation you were in, and relying on teammates and buffing up teammates. And then in certain situations, knowing it was your time to shine and stepping forward and having teammates buff and help you is what made Battlefield great. Not this nonsense that we got in 2042, not the ability to change your weapon loadouts on the fly, not this ability to call in some of these really goofy support vehicles like robot dogs and Jeeps and everything. It was more of thinking through the battlefield, thinking about how to coordinate with your teammates and pushing together as a fighting force. And that experience, that core experience is, when I talk to my friends, that core experience is exactly what we all reminisce about in the old Battlefield. Not the graphics, not the level design, although Levolution was cool as hell in Battlefield 4. But none of that. It was the camaraderie that we had and those moments that we all were like, oh yeah, do you remember that time that you did this while I did this? Or we stole this vehicle and I was repairing it while you were, whatever it happened to be. Those hero moments, those have faded away from modern Battlefield experiences. So I don't even know if the development team even remembers or has even played old Battlefield games at this point. But that is what, to me, this series need the most. So honestly, I don't want to say good riddance to Battlefield 2042. I did have fun with it in very select instances. But overall, I don't miss it. I don't play it. And I don't really have any optimism for the future based on things I've seen in the past. And I hope I'm proven wrong. I hope in a couple years from now, we can look back at this video and say, yeah, dummy, you got it wrong. Look how great Battlefield is. And I'll be the first to say, absolutely. And I'm so happy the series is back. But based on everything I've seen, I don't think that's going to be happening. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.